وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK Radio 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning, Michigan. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Good day, everyone. After 3 months of what President Biden called indiscriminate bombing, the future of Gaza remains a point of disagreement between Israel and the U.S. President Biden wants to see Gaza under a revitalized Palestinian Authority in the West Bank as a step toward a two-state solution, an idea opposed by the fragile Israeli government. Israel wants to keep security in control of the security in Gaza and at the same time perhaps to return settlements to the Strip. Can an independent Palestinian state be born out of the rubble and loss of life? In the next hour, we will discuss the different scenarios and mechanisms to that end. We have with us two distinguished guests and experts to help us navigate the complex situation. Mr. Khalil Jahshan, who is director of the Arab Center in Washington, D.C., and Professor Gregory Aftandilian with the American University in Washington, D.C. Before we get started, program note, we are coming to you not just on radio, but also on a video link. If you go to the Facebook page of U.S. Arab Radio, you will see us there on Zoom. Click on Zoom and you will be able to see us on video as well. My first question goes to both my two guests, and we'll start with Mr. Khalil Jahshan. How the Gaza Strip will end, the war in Gaza will end, how it will likely end, what's the likely scenario in your mind? Mr. Jahshan.
Well, this war of vengeance that's been taking place for 3 months in Gaza will end like all wars tend to end, which is a lot of casualties, a lot of victims, mostly innocent victims. And eventually, at one point, both sides reach a point of saturation where a ceasefire begins to make sense. We clearly haven't reached that point. But essentially, Israel will have to end its current meaningless invasion of Gaza because it can't achieve the goals that it has declared. It can't achieve particularly the goal of destroying Hamas as a movement and imposing a new form of government on the Palestinians. So essentially, we are going to go back to a ceasefire and the status quo ante, some form of understanding that will quieten that front, but not necessarily resolve politically the underlying issue, which is the issue of Palestine. I don't think any of the parties is at this point ready to do so, and definitely the people who hoard this diplomatic process to themselves, the United States of America in particular, is willing, particularly in an election year, to engage in serious diplomacy in the region.
Professor Aftandilian.
Well, I think at this point, we don't know exactly when this war is going to end. Hopefully it'll end soon, but, Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to continue this fighting. So it may go on, unfortunately, for several more months, and there'll be more destruction. The very sad part, of course, not only because of the civilian death toll, is the total destruction of Gaza's infrastructure. When you look at the map, the visuals of the bombings, it looks like Berlin in 1945. Whole neighborhoods just decimated. So at this point, there's going to be a lot of effort to try to say, okay, at the end of this conflict or the hostility, say, how do we rebuild Gaza? And that's not clear. The other uncertainty, of course, is the Israeli troops in Gaza. Indications from the Netanyahu government suggest that the Israeli troops are probably going to stay there for quite some time. And despite the fact that the U.S. is saying that, the Palestinians should govern Gaza, that does not seem to be in Netanyahu's playbook at this point.
Dr. Jahshan, Mr. Biden talks about indiscriminate strikes by Israel in Gaza. The question is he innocent? He is providing the bombs.
Absolutely not. The United States cannot be viewed as an innocent party in this conflict by any standard. From day one, the president opted to take sides. He acted as if he is a co-conspirator, if you will, an accessory to the violations that have taken place. He didn't have to do that. He could have risen to a higher moral ground and essentially called for a ceasefire, at least a humanitarian one, from the very beginning, knowing exactly what was going to happen in the absence of military symmetry in this conflict, knowing exactly that the civilian population are going to be the main victim of this fighting. Yet he opted to proceed with vengeance. I remember the first meeting with his staff at the White House immediately after the war. I got the impression, based on their own words, not mine, that the president is determined to support Israel 100%. He felt Israel has the right to avenge the events that preceded that on the 7th of October, and wanted him to have the opportunity to do that. In other words, the ample time to continue to level this version of total destruction that Greg just referred to, and the civilian casualties reaching almost according to different estimates, from about 22,000 victims thus far. Even if you take Israeli statistics into consideration, or claims, at least 14,000, 15,000 civilians, mostly children and women, in that list of casualties. So the president is not an innocent bystander. To simply describe what's going on, the onslaught and that has taken place, does not free him from the responsibility, not only morally, but legally even. Arming Israel, even without congressional approval, twice already, giving Israel the diplomatic support at the UN by blocking the possibility of ceasefire, makes him an accessory to this war and to the crimes that emerged from it.
Mr. Netanyahu, and my question now goes to Professor Aftandilian. Mr. Netanyahu talks about two objectives. One, eliminate Hamas, and two, free the hostages. Now, aren't these two conflicting goals? Can you free the hostages if you promise to kill the hostage takers?
Well, yes. I mean, that's you hit the nail on the head in terms of how contradictory that type of policy is, because, of course, Hamas, all that does is make Hamas keep the hostages longer. As we all know, they released about 120 with the intervention of Qatar and Egypt and some other players in the region, but they're not going to release the remaining hostages unless there's a true ceasefire. But if Netanyahu keeps going on and on about the destruction of Hamas, then why should they give their card away? Leaving aside the whole moral issue, but strategically, they're not going to release those hostages. So this doesn't really make sense. But from Netanyahu's perspective, he wants to show that he's the tough guy, and he will remain resolute. And this is what he's trying to tell the Israeli people. But of course, the families of the hostages have become a pretty effective lobby in Israel. And they're going to try to hold his feet to the fire to say the hostages should be number one concern, the destruction of Hamas, perhaps a secondary concern.
Mr. Jahshan, you did answer my following question, at least partially, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Can a Palestinian state be born out of the rubble and loss of life?
Let me first just add a couple of words to what Gregory just answered. Case in point, by the way, central to your question, the previous question, was the assassination recently, Tuesday, of Saleh al-Aruri, the member of the Hamas Politburo, a political leader within Hamas, formerly a co-founder of Izzuddin al-Qassam forces that belong to Hamas. But Saleh al-Aruri played a key role, by the way, in the previous negotiations over the release of the hostages. So just to show you the contradiction, if you assassinate the people you are negotiating, not you're supposed to negotiate, you are negotiating with, who the heck are you going to negotiate with down the road about the release of the remaining 100 plus hostages? So the contradiction is not just theoretical. The contradiction is practical in the practical implementation of Israeli policy. With regards to the Palestinian state, I would say no. Frankly, a Palestinian state, if it is to emerge in this region, which it should, that's the only rational solution, if you will, to the problem we have been dealing with for 75 years. The fact that the region is unstable because we have either one state too many or one state missing. And that missing state has to emerge unless we want to eliminate other states in the region. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. people on the Israeli side have to decide if they really want to have a stable region and want Israel to exist, which I assume they do. Then they have to allow for that Palestinian state to emerge, to create, if you will, some political solution to the that missing state, but to destroy the place the way we have seen, to engage in mass murder the way we have seen, and then to come all of a sudden in a highly charged conflict and tell people, come on, folks, let's just forgive and forget, and let's start building a state. Building a state requires a new psychology, and it requires a change of the way people look at their own history, which is not easy to do under normal circumstances. It becomes much, much more difficult to even conceive in light of the savagery we have seen, the vengeance we have seen, and the not only the logic involved, but the terminology involved, which is very genocidal, stuff we haven't heard for decades. Eliminating whole people, talking about there are no innocent civilians involved, there are no children, these children are going to grow up eventually and become terrorists. Well, frankly, that can be said by all conflicting sides. So Israel does not have monopoly or higher moral ground in this argument. All these arguments they use apply to them. And to come now naively, the way the President of the United States thinks, and say, okay, two-state solution, folks, let's focus on that. I'm running for office. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of energy left. I'm getting too old. So let's solve this problem. We have 3 months left. Look, this is an issue that has escaped, if you will, the logic of a political solution for decades. And it's not going to be solved in the middle of the rubble right now, so automatically and so quickly.
Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Professor Aftandilian what else are differences there are between Mr. Biden and the Israeli cabinet when we come back after the break.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most, and make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing the Gaza war, and Mr. Professor Aftandilian, what are the other differences between Mr. Biden and the Israeli cabinet?
Well, first of all, Biden has had a very strange relationship with Netanyahu going back many decades. Supposedly, he sent a note to Netanyahu several years ago, but I'm paraphrasing that, Bibi, I love you, but we disagree on almost everything. And during the whole controversy over the judicial overhaul, Biden actually sided with Netanyahu's opposition in a very public way. Biden knows these issues because he was formerly of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee before he became president, and he was even chairman for a while of that committee. He's traveled to the region, so he's known these issues for a long time. I think, he may be sincere about wanting a two-state solution, but getting from point A to point B is quite unrealistic at this point. The State Department, of course, under Biden, has been very critical of the two very far-right cabinet ministers, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, in the Israeli cabinet, who essentially have called for ethnic cleansing in Gaza and, the removal of the Palestinians and, putting Jewish settlements into Gaza once again. And so there's, of course, tension there. But the big tension, of course, is Biden's at least public position that there has to be a two-state solution and that a reinvigorated Palestinian Authority should take over the jurisdiction of Gaza. Netanyahu has come out strongly against that. There's no sort of meeting of the minds on that issue. But Netanyahu probably figures that as long as he has congressional support and the Biden administration is not using any real leverage, in other words, using, say, military aid leverage to stop such sort of encroachments on Gaza that Netanyahu wants, Netanyahu probably believes he can get away with this at this point. So there's certainly tension between Biden and Netanyahu and his cabinet, but without the U.S. using real leverage, I'm not sure much is going to change.
Dr. Jahshan, Secretary of State Blinken is about to go back to Israel yet again, and that follows a series of visits by himself and also by other senior U.S. officials. Those repeated visits, what do they tell you about the nature of the relationship between Israel and the U.S. at this time?
Essentially, the message is very clear. Tensions continue to boil. National interests of the United States are at stake. They are endangered by these differences that you just discussed with my colleague, Gregory, a minute ago. And this escalation is basically causing serious fears in Washington. Washington, particularly embarking, as I said earlier, on presidential elections, beginning the campaign within few months, is not assuring to the president and to his campaign and to his staff that this deterioration is going to serve him and serve him well. So Blinken is essentially, like you said, he's being sent to the region for the fourth time on a campaign, on a visit of this sort, for the fifth time to Israel, by the way. And he's going to be, look at the itinerary. I mean, by itself, it tells you the depth of the concern here in Washington. He's going to stop in Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Egypt, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Palestine, and of course, Israel itself for the fifth time, as I said. And the concern essentially at this time is how to lower the temperature. But you see, you can't have your cake and eat it too again. You cannot give Israel carte blanche to do whatever it wants and all the weapons it needs and all the diplomatic support internationally that it needs, and then come back and say, whoa, 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 slow down, guys. Let's lower the temperature because the conflict is spreading throughout the region and it's creating tension for us, even hundreds of miles away from Gaza, and but based on the conflict that's going on there in Gaza. So you have all these issues, some pertaining to the conduct of the war itself, that the secretary will be discussing with his counterpart, which is weird, Secretary of State discussing issues with Secretary of Defense. Mostly he's dealing with Gallant, and so you could see or read between the lines from the statements of both what are the issues. But the U.S. is petrified about the prospect of this spreading too quickly, as we have seen this week, to the Lebanese border. And listen, Israel is having a hard time dealing with Hamas and achieving its goals with Hamas. I'm not sure it can handle a more formidable enemy at the same time in the form of Hezbollah, and having not only a couple of 100,000 Israeli civilians having to leave their homes in the northern front with Lebanon, but maybe having 1 million or 2 million or 3 million Israelis, just like in Gaza, having to leave. So you have this panic right now within the administration. You might as well move the State Department to Tel Aviv right now. I mean, look, right now, as we speak, the secretary and his staff are on their way. You got Amos Hochstein in Israel negotiating issues pertaining to the Lebanese situation. You got the Assistant Secretary of State, Barbara Leaf, on her way to the region, dealing with particularly the deterioration on the West Bank. So almost everybody dealing with the Middle East is right now in the Middle East. So I'm not joking when I say we might as well move the Near East Bureau at least to Tel Aviv, because that's where they all are. And that reflects, I think, the concern and the fear on the part of the administration. These are serious issues that have not only repercussions for U.S. national interest, considering that the region is very, very upset with us. We are just completing this weekend. We are going to get the final results of a 14-country survey that Arab Center, through the Arab Opinion Index, has conducted the past 2 weeks. We're going to be, or we have interviewed more than 30,000 Arab citizens in all these countries, from Morocco to Yemen to Saudi Arabia to Palestine itself. And the results, preliminary results, show basically a majority, overwhelming majority, more than 80% of the people in the Arab world are upset with U.S. policy, are upset with Biden. They feel that he has been a disaster in trying to handle this crisis. And frankly, they feel that the U.S. is the biggest threat right now, national security threat to the Arab world. Even Iran is scoring better. China has scored better. Twice, as a matter of fact, as positive as the United States. And look at this, the reaction in the Arab world. The country most threatening to you, the U.S. The country in second place threatening to you, Israel. If they think the U.S. is more threatening to their national security in the Arab world, take that, and I think that if re-elected, President Biden has to start picking basically his broom and dustpan and cleaning up after his policies thus far in Gaza.
I like the idea of moving Mr. Blinken's office to Tel Aviv.
It's cheaper. It's less
Yeah.
expensive transportation, Atef, right?
And if you think about the climate change,
Yeah.
less fuel for the aircraft.
Hey, it's good for the environment. Yeah.
Professor Aftandilian, two of Mr. Netanyahu's ministers want to expel Gazans and have settlements to replace them in the Strip. How likely that to happen?
Well, I think, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, there's been a lot of U.S. criticism of these two cabinet ministers, and Netanyahu, of course, knows that. So I don't think they're going to prevail, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be an equitable solution to the Gaza problem. However, he has allowed Ben-Gvir, who was Minister of National Security, to actually hand out guns to West Bank settlers. And this is one of the reasons why there's been so many casualties in the West Bank, in addition to Gaza. So these guys on the far right are certainly causing the Netanyahu government some headaches in Washington, but I'm not sure they're going to succeed. However, it just inflames the political situation even more, because all that does is put more fear in the minds of the Palestinians that there would be a repeat of the Nakba, or the catastrophe of 1948. A lot of the symbolism has come back, where they feel that they will be expelled from their homeland.
When we come back after a short break, I will have a question for Mr. Jahshan. Some say every Palestinian killed or victimized in the Gaza war will create dozens of radicalized Palestinians. After the break.
With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics, according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing the future of Gaza and the war in Gaza and the prospects for a Palestinian state or a two-state solution. Mr. Jahshan, some say every Palestinian killed or victimized in the Gaza war will create dozens of radicalized Palestinians. How true that is?
I think it's true. It's not because I think it is true, but it's born by numbers. It's born by facts. It's born by public opinion surveys. If you talk to my colleague, for example, Khalil E, who is the most prominent pollster in Palestine and who has been researching this issue almost in every survey he's done over the past 30 years plus, he will tell you that this tactic by the Israelis is always followed by a period of radicalization. There is no doubt to those of us who study the issue of Palestine on a regular basis that younger generation are definitely much more radicalized because of that. And you get, these kids that have known nothing but Israeli occupation, have known nothing but Israeli destruction of their the essence of their life, their homes, their schools, their hospitals, and what do you expect him to do? It's kind of funny that when you look at radical Israelis, like real extreme people, keep saying there are no civilians, there are no innocent children in Palestine, and particularly in Gaza, because they all are growing to be a terrorist. But frankly, they do not see their role in that. They do not see the role of their own governments, successive governments over a long period of time. Gaza was not born yesterday. Gaza was not born on the 7th of October. Gaza has been under siege for almost a couple of decades. It's been under occupation for 56 years. It's been the result of what Gregory referred to earlier, the Nakba of 1948, where most of the population of Gaza came from refugees from cities that are in the Gaza belt, if you will, on the Israeli side when it was Palestine. So this is a 75-year-old crisis, not a 3 months old crisis. We have a short memory when it comes to analyzing conflicts like that. Look what happened when Sheikh Yassin was assassinated. Things got a lot more complicated and a lot more radical. Look what happened when Rantisi was assassinated. Who followed him? Same thing. And the same thing right now. Take a look at what's going to happen essentially with what's going to happen in terms of Saleh Harouri's replacement. It is a continuous process of radicalization, both Socially, I've had several friends over the years in Gaza who were psychiatrists and who have focused all their research on the children of Gaza. You know, what happens to generation after generation since 1967, at least most of the research has been. Same conclusion. This type of management of the conflict in Gaza has been radicalizing generation after generation. Ahmad Daif, where did he come from? The current leader of what's happening right now in Gaza, who's supposed to be or is being accused of leading the attack on October 7th. The current leadership as a whole, they call it the inside leadership, a lot more radicalized than the external leadership of Hamas. It's all as a result of their daily life of oppression and continued violence by the Israelis. The Israelis know about it. It's not accidental, for example, that almost every past leader or head of the Mossad, Israel's CIA equivalent, has been opposed to targeted assassination and opposed to this type of policy because of its radicalization. And it's not accidental that essentially Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, during his last trip to Israel, what did he say? He appealed to Israel not to turn what potentially could be a strategic victory for them into a tactical defeat, a disaster, because they want to have their cake and eat it too. The violence they are using is creating more terrorists than eliminating.
Professor Aftandilian, Mr. Netanyahu has been facing corruption charges, and now he is facing an intelligence failure over the events of October 7th. Will the Gaza war determine Mr. Netanyahu's political future?
Well, I saw a recent poll from Israel which says that only 15% of the Israeli public wants Netanyahu to remain prime minister. And that's because they blame him for not protecting the Israeli citizens near the Gaza border that happened on October 7th. And historically, Israeli leaders get blamed. So Netanyahu understands, I think, that his political fortunes are certainly in decline. However, he's a great political survivor. His main concern is to remain prime minister and to kick all of these things down the road, including his corruption charges. And he believes that as long as he is in office, perhaps those charges will eventually go away, though I don't think that's going to be the case. But this has ramifications for the current war in Gaza, because I think in Netanyahu's thinking, the longer the war takes place, the better the chances he has to avoid these corruption charges. So you see that his domestic political situation is tied to the prolongation of this war. And it adds, unfortunately, more misery for the lives of the Palestinians.
Mr. Jahshan, what is the alternative? Let's say the current government coalition in Israel collapses for various reasons. Do some speculation here. Who might come to replace Mr. Netanyahu?
That's a tough question, Atef. The choice from a Palestinian perspective sometimes looks like a choice between Tweedledee and Tweedledum. It's not an easy choice for the Palestinians. As Professor Aftandilian just mentioned a couple of times already in his answers, the situation in Israel is complicated. It is loaded. There are people in the cabinet and people who are conspiring, trying to backstab Netanyahu and take his place, that are a lot more radical. If you could imagine people more radical than he is, that are openly talking about ethnic cleansing and transfer of population and making even the U.S. And the Biden administration quite nervous listening to their logic and their political solution. But there are also other options. Now, whether this crisis in Gaza, when you think back a bit to the 6th of October, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis basically demonstrating for month after month after month. They are being unhappy with where Netanyahu is leading, because he's not only leading a more radical government, he is really transforming Israel. He's hijacking Israel from the perspective of almost half of Israel. They describe him as engaging in a coup. It was a coup d'etat that he was trying to implement legally, changing the legal setup in Israel to make it more authoritarian, if you will, much more a dictatorship, a la current right-wing dictatorships in Europe and Latin America and other places that he is fond of and seems to be imitating. And so whether that camp will somehow be stirred politically and morally, should there be a ceasefire, and I agree with Gregory, I hope it is soon, because frankly, the price, the human price, is just unbearable if it continues the way we have seen. I mean, what does it take to stop this need for vengeance that Mr. Biden supports? Is 22,000 not enough? I mean, what do you want, 30, 50,000? I mean, what is enough? So it has to stop at one point. And whether that faction, if you will, or that half of Israel will wake up morally and politically and take matters into their own hands. There are people in Israel who would like to see definitely a ceasefire. They see the foolishness of this whole campaign. And they feel that the future of Israel lies in an alternative policy that seeks some sort of political accommodation with the Palestinians. Now, whether that will be too late or not, that's another story. But that's essentially a scenario that is still alive. It is far-fetched at this stage, particularly in the heat of the battle right now. It's just hard to see it. But look, this conflict has been emotional from its very inception 75 years ago, and it has changed suddenly mid-course in the past, and it could change mid-course in the future. So you cannot totally deny the possibility of a serious change in Israel, where some people who, let's say, are in the center, people like the Biden administration is trying to cultivate right now. It's hard to see them as centrists, like, let's say, Gantz, like Gallant, like others that are closer to Washington in their perspective that Gaza should be, once the heat of the battle is over, Gaza should be run by Palestinians, and that there should be some sort of accommodation with the Palestinians. Whether that camp in Israel will prevail and be revived, because right now it's dormant, at best, semi-dead, comatose in reality. Whether it can be revived, the Middle East has shown us that miracles are possible historically. Whether that is still possible or not, 2,000 years later, I'm not sure.
Miracles, and the question, can Israel survive a long war economically? That's a question we will discuss when we come back after the break.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
As the weather gets colder, it's a good idea to layer up with scarves, hats, and mittens. Another layer of protection this season is to get your flu and COVID-19 vaccines. You can get both vaccines at the same time. Talk to your healthcare provider or learn more at michigan.gov/COVID-flu-RSV and layer up for some added peace of mind. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most. And make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493. ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to Radio Baladi. We are discussing the Gaza war. Can Israel survive a long war economically? Mr. Aftandilian.
Well, we have seen media reports that Israel is calling back some of its reserve forces that were deployed to Gaza. Some of that may be for military reasons, but perhaps a lot of that is due to economic reasons, because these people are civilians for most of their lives, and that has hurt the Israeli economy. There's been some estimates that GDP growth in Israel will take a hit this year, perhaps by a drop by 1%, or could be even more. So that's certainly a concern. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the driving force, because as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, Netanyahu has his own political calculations. So while he recognizes, of course, that the economy is taking a fairly significant hit, I think he believes that his own political survival rests on keeping the war going as long as he can. At some point, of course, that has to, the rubber is going to hit the road, as they say. But at least for the short term, I think he'll continue the war, though the economic situation is in the background that he will eventually have to consider.
Mr. Jahshan, as we know, President Biden wants Gaza to join the West Bank under a revitalized Palestinian Authority. Do you see a role for President Mahmoud Abbas to play here?
That's certainly one of the declared objectives of the administration. Let me just mention the study that I've noticed recently by the National Bank of Israel, estimating partial cost as of December, actually, early December, of 200 billion shekels, the cost of this war in Gaza. This is $50 billion. And that's partial, and it doesn't reflect all the economic cost for Israel that Gregory just referred to. So it is prohibitive, and I'm not sure Israel can sustain it. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure the U.S. can sustain it. We haven't talked at all about U.S. costs. All these fleets that have been sent to the region. I think it has some economic logic why part of that fleet had to be withdrawn this week from the region. The Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. It's very costly, if you will, part of the American military to be sent to the region. But with regards, again, give me your question again, Atef.
Any role for Mr. Abbas,
Yeah.
President Mahmoud Abbas?
Well, as long as Abbas is president of the Palestinian Authority, he has a role in the sense of being involved in whatever decisions are being made. But frankly, considering the historic challenge being faced by the Palestinians right now, if I were Abbas, this is what I would do. I would essentially resign my position effective 1 year from today, and declare immediately preparations for national elections in both Gaza and the West Bank. Of course, that would require a ceasefire, immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It would require and pass the responsibility on to the UN. Let the international community manage and fund these elections, allow for political parties to proceed, and let the Palestinian people in the West Bank and Gaza decide the future. And then, of course, have a change of leadership at the end of that 1 year. Simply to leave, as some people are asking, will create chaos right now in the West Bank without an alternative. And therefore, there has to be some orderly manner. Does he have a role? He could have a positive role if he wants to retire with a positive step like this and leave a positive legacy. That's what he should do. He should resign, but leave a legacy of democracy, a legacy of elections, not simply come to govern, be tempted by, if you were, the lure, being waved, the bait being waved at him by some Israelis and some here in the States. It's not very popular, but it's being used as a pressure point that he should come in and revamp his Palestinian Authority, clean it up somehow, and miraculously come in and govern both the West Bank and Gaza, because he's more acceptable. But the Israelis have let it be known he is not acceptable. The Netanyahu government, both extremists and non-extremists, are refusing him as an alternative. I mean, even under the pressure of Blinken arriving in the region, Galland tells us today that yes, Gaza needs to be under Palestinian control after the ceasefire. But I mean, this is easier said than done. Who? What? They are talking about either bringing new leadership on top of Israeli tanks, or they're talking about village leaguers in the old days, basically local traditional leaders that are, cooperators or cooperate with the Israelis, and somehow they can be imposed as a new leadership for Gaza. So the answer is la'am in Arabic, yes and no. The authority in Ramallah has a role to play in transition to something better, not to replace the current situation. because it really hasn't proven to be successful totally in the West Bank. So I'm not sure it can be successful, especially under duress in Gaza.
Well, I have 1 minute left. Mr. Aftandilian, my last question is, rejecting the two-state solution is not a good idea for Israel as a democracy and as Jewish in nature. Now, why can't Israel see the harm?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Because, of course, there are Israelis who do understand that the status quo is simply untenable, and that Israel will forever be an occupying power for many years hence. But as Khalil, my colleague, has mentioned, right now tensions and passions are so inflamed, you're not going to have kind of a rational discussion on this. But hopefully down the road, more and more Israelis will come to that realization that they either have to be, there either has to be an independent Palestinian state next to Israel, or Israel remains a perpetual occupying power with all the problems associated with that. So,
Professor Gregory Aftandilian, thank you very much for your contribution. I also thank Dr. Khalil Jahshan, Director of the Arab Center in Washington, D.C.,